Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast, episode 26, is entitled UK Monarchy and Human Rights. By way of an introduction, this week's article and podcast draws upon a couple of previous podcasts on this subject and is updated with subsequent events since those publications. Have you ever wondered whether the British royal family and their associates in the British media, particularly those in the Royal Rota, live in an alternative universe compared to the rest of us? Are there different forces operating in their zone? Does the UK monarchy use a different rule book when it comes to interaction with the Sussexes, as opposed to every other family member? Is slavery still alive and thriving in the UK monarchy? Anyone who dares to question this abusive, oppressive society is pounced upon with the aim to break their spirit and to then rebuild them in the clone-like stature of the other members. If that is not acceptable to any objectors, they are treated like slaves gone bad, and they are treated like prey, hunted down around the globe until they break or their heart stops beating. Back in the real world, where laws do exist, this alternate universe is not recognised or known about. Most people do not see the red flags about what is happening. All they see are two wealthy people shirking their duties. Those of us with sight, and more importantly vision, recognise what is happening here, and it is a very dangerous game that is being played out in front of our eyes. All the key groups who are acting as oppressors are those who benefit from the current setup. More importantly, if groups or individuals outside of that protected cluster did half of what has been going on for centuries in that protected bubble, it would be considered against the law, national or international. This article is a foray into basic human rights legislation and how it is used when it suits certain people within that protected cluster, but how it equally is ignored when it comes to the Sussexes, and the fake outrage about whatever Harry and Meghan are doing on any given day. Most of the time, things have not been done or said or meant in the way the outrage is reported, but as squad members know, truth is not a necessary element in this game, just like there are no established rules. I am by no means a legal expert, so before any of the haters start to moan about this and that, we know they haunt our pages. This podcast is based on my perceptions and my thoughts of how the same legislation is used for some people in the royal family, but totally ignored when it comes to Harry and Meghan. These are my perceptions of how certain groups have been given permission, direct or implied, to operate outside of established procedures in the pursuit of the two people who are now treated like modern-day runaway slaves. UK monarchy and its partners in the media are acting like an ex-partner who cannot believe their other half has left, and in doing so is publicly using abusive methods to gain sympathy for those with limited clarity on what is happening in front of them, in the hope that the couple will break and return. Yes, there are still people out there who think there will be a return. My, oh my. The aim is for Harry to leave his wife and children and return to the royal family and be the acceptable face of the UK monarchy until the Cambridge children are adults. And then Harry would be part of the people in the firm who serve no purpose and who are shoved into the background and form part of the royal wallpaper. Like I said earlier, if this occurred in any other family setting, legal groups would be concerned for the people within the framework, particularly the children born into that framework who are high in the line of succession. Children created to serve the monarchy. Children born without rights. Children who are firstborn are considered valuable. Others are born to support the firstborn. Children who are not allowed independent thought. Children who are not allowed to fulfill their potential and who must at all times devalue themselves in order to make the firstborn look good. In any other walk of life, treatment of children along those lines would be considered anything but positive, and on several fronts is a breach of human rights. This is a preamble around human rights legislation, both international and local. I hope that at the end of this piece, increasing numbers of people begin to question what is going on here. I will refer to a few elements of the legislation, but I have also included sections which I hope give food for thought, which will lead you to question other implications. I will discuss the abusive behaviour disguised as journalism and the mirroring of patterns of behaviour when a partner, an ex-partner or family members include in this group members of the British royal family and their senior staff. Follow the actions of an abusive perpetrator, and when that does not work, the course of actions will be explained and you will see how closely they match with what is described as in law as illegal. If the abused shows signs of thinking about leaving, all manner of negative scenarios are described to the victim in an effort to make them stop thinking of escape. If the victim does escape, then sinister methods are employed to make them return to the abuse that they know. If that does not work, then all attempts are made to defame them in the public eye. The victim or victims cannot be seen to succeed. If years later this abuse is continuing, and now includes children of the targets, then more than one boundary has been crossed, and another representative needs to step in before a life or lives are lost. In the case of Harry and Meghan and their young family, I have stated several times in previous podcasts, this couple are up against powerful forces, i.e. the UK monarchy, the government, media, both written and televised, aristocracy, police forces. The Queen is the head of the armed forces. The Queen appoints, upon the advice of the Home Secretary, the Commissioner of Police. The Queen, as head of state, is supposed to remain neutral in respect of political matters. Most people know that the royal family meet representatives of government about legal matters that they are concerned about, and the end result of those supposedly neutral matters is that the British royal family are then allowed to be exempt from the requirements that everyone else in the country is held to account. Officially, it is still stated that the Queen retains an important symbolic role as the figure whose name justice is carried out. Worth mentioning here that in both civil and criminal proceedings, no action can be taken against the sovereign as a person under the UK law. Newspapers work hand in glove with the government and the monarchy, and the royal reporters and TV media personalities peddle out the same messages daily. The hate groups have emerged from the content of the rhetoric and are helped along on social media platforms by paid trolls and paid bots. Only those societal groups mentioned above benefit from the messages being repeated daily, and the social media platforms currently earn more for their shareholders from giving hate rhetoric and hate-filled videos a platform. Hatred has been monetised in the UK. Time well overdue now for the international bodies to step forward or step aside to allow those who wish to do something about this state of affairs. Let's have a look at the context for human rights legislation. Key points. What are human rights? Human rights are standards that allow all people to live with dignity, freedom, equality, justice and peace. Guaranteed to everyone without distinction of any kind, such as race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Human rights are part of international law, contained in treaties and declarations that spell out specific rights that countries are required to uphold. Some countries incorporate human rights in their own national state and local laws. Why are human rights important? Human rights reflect the minimum standards necessary for people to live with dignity. Human rights give people the freedom to choose how they live, how they express themselves, and what kind of government they want to support. By guaranteeing life, liberty, equality, and security, human rights protect people against abuse by those who are more powerful. What are human rights characteristics? That's divided up into 5 sections, first of which is universal, and that means human rights belong to all people. The next stage is inalienable. Human rights cannot be taken away. Interconnected. Human rights are dependent on one another. Indivisible. Human rights cannot be treated in isolation. Non-discriminatory. Human rights should be respected without prejudice. Where do human rights come from? There is a diagram, hopefully you can see this on screen, and it is also contained in the article. There is an international bill of human rights. From that, there is a universal declaration of human rights. And from that, there are 2 areas. An international covenant on economic, social and cultural rights. And on the other side, there is an international covenant on civil and political rights. This International Bill of Rights contains the following: the right to equality and freedom from discrimination, the right to life, liberty and personal security, freedom from torture and degrading treatment, the right to a fair trial, the right to privacy, freedom of belief and religion, freedom of opinion, right of peaceful assembly and association, the right to participate in government, the right to social security, the right to work, the right to an adequate standard of living, the right to education, the right to health, the right to food and housing. Who is responsible for upholding human rights? Under human rights treaties, governments have the primary responsibility for protecting and promoting human rights. However, governments are not solely responsible for human rights. Every individual and every organ of society shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universe and effective recognition and observance. The provision means that not only the government, but also businesses, civil society and individuals are responsible for promotion and respecting human rights. When a government ratifies a human rights treaty, it assumes a legal obligation to respect, protect, and fulfil the rights contained in the treaty. In the article, there is a section on UK monarchy and protocols versus international and UK law in terms of privacy. There is a diagram on screen, hopefully, and certainly a detailed depiction in the article, which lists the various sections of the rights contained in the Human Rights Act, such as right to life, right to be free from slavery or forced labour, right to a fair trial. And Article 8 is one of those that are shown in this image, and that is the right to respect for private and family life, home and correspondence. Article 9, right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. As I said, there are a number of them there, too many to go through in the podcast, but you will see hopefully on the image on screen, and you will also have more details on each of those articles in the actual article itself. Now, Article 8 is an interesting one, which is why I quoted one of those. This, where it says, a private and family life. Nobody should be able to secretly watch what you are doing without good reason, and we have the right to enjoy family life in the way we choose. The right to a private life protects your dignity and autonomy, your right to be independent and to make your own decisions about your life. That includes the right to personal autonomy and physical and psychological integrity. This right means you must not be physically or psychologically interfered with. Respect for your private and confidential information, including the storing and sharing of data about you. The right to control the spreading of information about your private life, including photographs taken covertly. Article 8 is the section of the human rights legislation that was used in the communication from Prince William's legal team to UK media and whoever else, and all action ceased, and even comments made by some reporters on social media was removed. I don't need to say what the content of those comments were, or the subject of why Prince William was concerned about that, but let's just say Article 8 was used and the response was immediate. My question is, why is this international piece of legislation, which is in force with some amendments to ensure that it suits the UK legal framework, does not appear to be applied to the Sussexes? Whether it should come into play, as Prince Harry is a UK citizen, or whether it is applicable in the USA, as it is now the home of the Sussexes, I have no idea. I am not a legal expert at all. I am merely inquisitive as to why UK media are using the same piece of legislation in different ways for two members of the royal family, i.e., one is allowed to use it to stop articles and discussions about his private life, but the other has been chased around the world and is written about daily with no regard to the law in existence. Regardless of titles, Prince Harry and his family are no less deserving of protection under the law than anyone else. It is time for sensible people of the UK to give some thought to the process of monarchy, and whether or not it is relevant in a modern society. Questions should be asked in terms of whether a modern society needs and should pay for a monarchy. There are questions to be asked about how many in the family line should be funded by the UK taxpayer. Is it right in this day and age to have children brought into this world to be used as chattels and have a life mapped out for them from birth to grave? Is it right that the firstborn child of a senior royal is considered a future king or queen, regardless of whether they wish to take on that role, and more importantly, have the competence to do it. Are we saying that modern-day slavery within royal circles is acceptable? Children are prevented from reaching their full potential. Children are used as objects, not human beings. Children have no rights within royal circles, but they would if they were born outside of it. Treatment of children in this way would be considered to be abusive outside of royal confines. Prince Harry and Meghan have been treated like pariahs because they dared to do the following. They wanted to work for a living, did not want to be a third wheel for his older brother and wife merely because he was born second. Royal family and their media associates in the Royal Rota have tried to make it difficult for the Sussexes to leave by quoting all manner of restrictive reasons why it was not a good idea. That did not work. The royal family have attempted to punish Prince Harry for marrying someone who was not from the gene pool, usually fished in for spouses, in order to continue the parasitic way of living off the UK public. The royal family have spent the last 5 years of a bullying and harassment campaign against the newest member of the royal family, and who also is a person of colour. Needless to say, the campaign backfired and the couple left the UK. UK media professionals constantly and openly used phrases that ordered Meghan to go back to her own country. Prior to that, there was talk of shipping her and Harry off to Africa, as if the whole continent of Africa could be used by the British royal family as some kind of dumping ground and punishment for those who did not abide by the rules. Rules that they were born into and had no say in composition. Rules that morphed into various permutations dependent upon the anger that the British media wanted to pretend existed on any given day. In 2019, I referred to conversations on social media, on one particular social media platform, by one of the Queen's counsels, who wrote on one of these said social media platforms about, and I quote, the undertones of racism written by Royal Rota reporters. End of quote. The QC referred to the implications for people of colour in the UK if someone like Meghan could be treated this way. What hope for ordinary people? Like clockwork, one of the reporters from that rota, who regularly posts negative comments about Meghan and implies that Harry is a weak and easily led man, etc., etc., responded to the QC, admitting that, and I, again, in quotes, there were indeed undertones of racism in the reporting, but the QC should know that undertones is not against the law. End of quote. Let that sink in for a moment. We have always known that this has existed from the start 5 years ago, and we were gaslighted every time. Now that same pack feel confident and secure enough to admit they choose their wording carefully, but it is indeed racism that is the main theme here. One of the royal photographers made a short video last year, I'm sure you all remember it, pretending to show sorrow about how things had turned out and was begging Harry to return to help out the Cambridges. Less than 2 months later, that same photographer had an article in one of the tabloids, now stating that Sussexes, and I open quotes again, deserve all the abuse, end of quote, that they are receiving. I stated in all of my articles since March 2020 that the treatment of the Sussexes, commencing with Meghan since 2016, has been abusive, which has become worse over time, and the dangers to the Sussex family have increased because of the behaviour of the royal family and their partners in abuse in the British media. Let me touch upon briefly in this podcast, but as usual, more detail in the article. Looking at toxic working and family environments. All of the activity against the Sussexes is in breach of human rights legislation. None of what the Sussexes have done in leaving an abusive environment is against UK or international law. Prince Harry will always remain a prince of a future king, and nothing can change that, despite all of the nonsense and the rhetoric that's invented from day to day, depending on what subject they need a distraction from. So let's bring in Harry and Meghan with some farcical foolishness that they like to publish. All this talk of removing various titles is meant to cause emotional harm, coming back to toxic environments and the law. It's done deliberately. One, it's distraction, but also it's meant to cause harm, emotional harm in this case. Some have been removed and others may be in the future in terms of titles. Removing the dukedom would require an Act of Parliament. Good luck to them with that. If that is yet another desperate route the British royal family and media friends wish to see happen, for one, it requires legislation to remove something from someone who has not broken any laws and has not, in fact, done anything wrong. Secondly, it will open the door for automatic removal of other statuses of other members of the royal family. And thirdly, this will not be a good look of the UK to the rest of the world. It will be based on vindictiveness and malice yet again, merely because the couple expressed their right to walk away from abuse. The light of the Sussexes will not be dimmed by anything that the UK does. And in fact, every time they attempt another abusive act or try and duplicate what the Sussexes are doing, always abject failure and low-grade outputs, it only reinforces to the global community that the Sussexes were right to leave the UK for the state of their mental health. Meghan nearly died by her treatment in the UK, and there are many throughout history who did meet this fate, just because they were seen as a threat to a way of doing things in royal circles. Let me just give a few examples in this podcast. There are plenty more, both in the article and the list of references at the end of the article. I refer to these as exhibits, because in future, if there are any legal proceedings taken on any of these fronts, I am sure these and more will be included as exhibits. So let's go. Exhibit: breach in basic human rights in respect of a child. I have a concern about children born into that type of regime, that no amount of wealth can heal or even pretend to look better than what is actually happening. Any other family doing what the royals do to and with their children would have child services on their doorstep. Child slavery then turns into slavery of adults, and this belief by some media pundits that they have rights to what happens inside a woman's womb and who should be there to see the action, etc., it is grotesque. For other matters relating to children, stretching far back in royal history, one would have thought there is much that the royal family and the media could and should be focused upon. If the royal family cannot function without two people and their child who they chased away because of their abuse towards them, then it speaks volumes about the work ethic and popularity and income generation of all the others. I am of the firm opinion, as a non-legal person, that this treatment of the Sussexes is in breach on multiple aspects of articles of basic human rights legislation. Royal protocol is not the law, and protocol stated in respect of the Sussexes is not written down anywhere, just something expected should happen in respect of the Sussexes only. Another exhibit. Article 8 was quickly pulled out of the magician's hat for one prince on an alleged rumour. Harry and Meghan have so many receipts of abusive and illegal acts against them, enough to contain volumes of incidents of actions in breach of the law on multiple articles, including Article 8. My caveat being, I am a non-legal person, but I stand by my opinion. All of these actions against Harry is pushing him further away from his blood relatives, not bringing him closer. No one rushes to return to their abuser. Litigation could take place at any time, on so many fronts, and may well do so in the future. From my non-legal brain, I would have much to say in any legal setting on a number of fronts, and I am 100% certain that Meghan would win every single one. Every accusation and every deed claimed to have taken place, and the abuse that Meghan has suffered, and the basic human rights violated, all fall within one of two areas that this institution claims at various points in their fairy tales not to exist or be in place. Exhibit, i.e., being a member of the British royal family, being a senior working royal. It must have been a mirage on all those tours and visits then. Expected by the royal family to be treated during pregnancy by the royal family medical team, expected to parade outside the Lindo wing with the latest royal baby, being expected as part of royal duty to parade the first baby of colour outside the Lindo wing, and even to give the royal rota first signs of what shade the skin colour would be, in this royal family that Meghan was not deemed to be part of, anyway. Apart from in publicity images, which made the British royal family look good. Secondly, not classed as an employee either, so not entitled to medical assistance for suicidal thoughts. Passport and credit cards, car keys, bank cards removed and kept by human resources. What for? No legal requirement for any employer to retain such documentation, just a photocopy and stamped with the employer stamp and signed and dated that the original of each document has been seen and when. HR does not even need to see copies of such documentation, let alone keep it, for members of the public passing through, because Meghan was not family. No finance set up for her. She paid for everything herself. Not a family member either, apparently, and her child's birth certificate had her name removed from it, and only the Duchess title left on this important document. An illegal act, by the way, but a way of removing the name of an actual person from their child's birth certificate. Master and slavery mentality. Next exhibit, toxic signs. When is it appropriate to cut ties with a family member? Consider a few examples listed below. There are many more contained in the reference sources listed at the end of the article. Lying, blaming, criticising, manipulating, invalidating or ignoring your feelings, creating drama or crises, refusing to compromise, yelling, cursing or calling you names, gossiping or speaking ill of you behind your back, making unreasonable demands, playing the victim, refusing to apologise, and if they do, it's shallow, coerced or fake, lacking genuine concern or interest in you and your life, creating so much stress, anxiety and pain that your health, ability to work or general well-being are negatively impacted. UK media, working in hand with the British royal family and therefore are complicit and individually liable for any harm that is identified in any future litigation if things progress to that stage, for individual acts of abusive behaviour and trying to hide behind they are just doing their job, etc. When you think of the clout chasers, including the carnival of so-called experts, aka clowns, and the unknown children's authors who felt the need to come out from under their stones, and the clout chasers who were taken from their mausoleums to face cameras and spout nonsense, and let us not have the ever-growing obsolescence of the royal rota. They are attached to the royal family like embryos. And as the monarchy falls in popularity and the questions increase relating to the need for one in a modern society, the same questions will and are being asked about the royal rota. Any person seen to potentially rock that gravy train of income and lifestyles for these adult embryos, or take away perceived income from the otherwise unsold children's authors out there, some have shown their true colours. I am waiting for all their bestsellers to appear now that Meghan has moved on to another one of her many projects lined up. All of these people and groups are very much like toxic organisms. Let me briefly touch upon toxicity and the impact on mental health. You know, because we have mental health champions, apparently, within the British royal family. Toxic people are dangerous to our inner peace, and they are dangerous to our self-esteem. The secret to growth is learning how to identify them and detach them from our journey to happiness. Toxic people take the joy out of work and holidays. Toxic people thrive on drama. It gives them sympathy and it gets them attention. Best of all, it allows them to manipulate the emotions of the people around them. A person who is identified by negative things in their life will only attract more negativity into yours. That's an extract from one of the references, and all the details of where that quote comes from is listed in the references at the end of the article. Toxic people are obsessed with themselves and think only of their own feelings and opinions, showing little or no concern for others. They have a need to be the centre of attention and have control over the people and situations that surround them. For example, a self-centred family member might demand that you babysit their children for free, while a self-centred boss might demand that you work late. Regardless whether or not you may have plans of your own with your own nuclear family. Toxic people deliberately mislead when it comes to telling the truth and are toxic to our inner peace and mental well-being. They make it impossible for us to trust anything that they say. Someone who is comfortable with telling small lies and equally at ease with telling big ones too. They will obscure and even reinvent the truth to conceal their flaws and mistakes. Have you ever known someone who has an obsessive need to be right all the time? Being seen as wrong by anyone is like a rejection to them and cannot be tolerated at any cost. These people will argue their point of view until they are blue in the face or buried in the ground. I can think of many examples from all groups who have been toxic towards Sussexes and in particular Meghan. If any of them are challenged about their version of the truth, they double down on their story, and their rage is evident for all to see. They can dish it out, as they say, but they cannot ever take being challenged. I am sure you all can think of a few. Seems to be a common trait with all the known toxic individuals and groups who have abused the Sussexes over and during the last 5-year period, and some of them are still continuing with it now, even though they are on USA soil. Those people who are constantly stuck in a negative loop rarely have a kind word to say about others. Most rational people know that there is a mixture of good and bad in people, but toxic people do not view people in that way. It would force them to look deeply at themselves and their approach to life. Toxic people in our own lives can sometimes be hard to spot, i.e. they can be vile to others, but not so evident to family or close friends. Observe the relationships of the people in your life and might just be surprised to realise some motivation you never noticed before. This quote is from one of the references quoted, as I said, at the end of the article, and it's very apt, I think, for this podcast. Emotional and physical abuse, criticism, lying, and emotional starvation are all signs it's time to leave someone behind. If you spend your nights lying in loneliness or quiet heartbreak, it is a sign that things have run their course and come to a natural end. I would say that this statement applies to leaving a situation behind, not just an individual. Many grassroots organisations working hard to ensure that coercive control became a criminal offence. This has marked a huge step forward in tackling domestic abuse. Now it is important to make sure that everyone understands what it is. Coercive control creates invisible chains and a sense of fear that pervades all elements of a victim's life. It works to limit their human rights by depriving them of their liberty and reducing their ability for action. Experts like Evan Stark liken coercive control to being taken hostage. As he says, the victim becomes captive in an unreal world created by the abuser, entrapped in a world of confusion, contradiction, and fear. And to bring this podcast to a close, let's have a look at all the nonsense that's gone on, really, over the last couple of years. All the protesting and gutter behaviour about the Sussexes leaving the UK and now already living a better quality of life and safer and protected more so than in the UK is being done by people who were better off with the Sussexes staying within the fold. All those protesting are worried that the royal family cannot survive, or will at best be severely low on popularity and income generation in its current form, which means less income generation for the tabloids and TV talk shows, which have nothing to offer to compete in any meaningful way with the growing number of streaming services and online news networks. I call that karma. USA, on a matter of principle, regardless of the individuals in this case, are you happy to sit back and not take action of 5 years and counting of abusive behaviour towards an American citizen on UK soil for 3 years, and the abuse has continued for the 2 since the couple had to flee the UK due to the increasing risks on their lives, and in one case 2 people threatening to end the life of Harry for marrying outside his race, and who are currently in prison. The abuse targeting all of the Sussex family on USA soil from the UK is obscene in its methods, and made worse that both children are also targeted. the youngest child targeted when she was just 4 days old. In September 2020, the state of California passed a new law relating to coercive control, one aspect of the abuser's repertoire, to protect California residents. Why then has the USA not stepped up to the plate to use the legislation that exists to take action against UK media on behalf of others targeting and harassing a USA family who live in that state? Ordinary people cannot afford years of legal process, and many are suffering in silence. Performative legislation is not enough. Action needs to be taken. So far, it has been USA billionaires who have stepped forward for the Sussex family at crucial points in this escape from the UK, even providing security when the British royal family pulled security without warning and stopped all funding. Done with clear malice and intent to increase the risk to the already high possibility of harm to the Sussex family, helped along by the hate-inciting rhetoric in the tabloids every day in the UK. Over 100 articles a day of venom, and their comment sections full of hate-filled posts, negative comments on any other member of the royal family. The tabloids close their comment sections down, but leave them all the hate posts about Harry and Meghan. Time for performative legal measures to move into actual activity and not rely on USA citizens to provide security and accommodation when the country of birth for Meghan stood by and did nothing at all. There may have been genuine reasons for that stance, and the Sussexes are now earning their own money and paying taxes, helping vulnerable groups, and have their own security team. Even so, it is overdue to sit back and watch abuse take place for such a long time and not use the legislation that exists. The legislation is there. I keep on repeating this plea, and I am doing it again. Please, someone or people within the international legal community, and definitely from within the USA, hopefully California itself, as it seems to be, and at least to have contain the most up-to-date progressive legal stance in terms of this type of abuse. Please, someone come together. Harry and Meghan have gone above and beyond, are still doing what they do for vulnerable people. They, at the same time, have been dealing with a whole range of legal activities, and as we all know, Meghan has recently won hers. All that was done, and the dragging out of it, was to wear her down, and also to make money in the interim from clickbait articles in their press. Enough is enough now. This family have done more than enough. They've stepped forward. They've done a great deal of things that I believe the state should have done. Countries, including the UK, should have stopped, but as they're part of the problem, it becomes an international legal matter for me. I hope that this podcast and anything else that the rest of the supporters are doing gets someone's attention, whether it be USA, whether it be a state within the USA, or the international legal forums that exist. Please, it is time. In fact, it's beyond time now. We've gone past the time that we can sit and talk about it. Action is required now. That's all I have to say on this podcast. I hope you found it informative. I hope you find the articles, and particularly the links that go with the articles, in terms of the source and the sources that I used. I hope from this it spurs some kind of action, because it's needed now. Bye from Ivy. Bye.